All right. So good morning. I'm Marisa Nelson, Law Office of Marisa Nelson PC. I am an estate planning, wills, trust, and probate lawyer in California. So we're here today just to have a quick chat with Jarell. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jarell Oshodi. I'm a data privacy attorney. I own the law office of Jarell Oshodi, and I provide data privacy compliance to organizations along with training.
Awesome. Super important stuff. And I think kind of similar to what I do, a lot of people don't know if they need it, that they need it. Like, it seems like that's a really growing field. And yeah, maybe we'll chat more about that when we wrap up our wills and trusts discussion. But just to preface before we dive in, I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in California. I am not going to be giving legal advice here. We're just going to have a general conversation. Some of the things we talk about may be very different state to state, but there's a lot of general information that is the same or similar throughout the US. And I think will be useful to a lot of people. So I don't know if you can hear my cat in the background, but he's very excited. We do a lot of pet planning here, have a lot of pet owners as clients. So yeah, that's night period. Let's see. So yeah, that said, what would be helpful to discuss? I know a lot of people, there's such a range of knowledge with wills and trusts and everything from like, I think I've heard about that. Maybe I need something. I'm not sure if I even do, to like, I'm worried about planning for my kids or my pets. Like, where are you at that way?
Well, I have a 2-year-old. So I had a baby during the pandemic. So we can discuss what needs to be updated with regard to my kids, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So broadly speaking, I would say there's a few different key points to think about when planning for kids, especially young kids. And the first one that comes to mind for a lot of people is appointing a guardian, and just who would take care of my kids if I'm not here temporarily or permanently. And that can be both a really important driving factor for a lot of people to get some sort of estate planning done, and also something that makes people put it off because it's such an overwhelming thing to think about. We don't want to think about like what happens if we're not here. And it can make such a difference to have these pieces in place that way, so that you get to decide, like if you think it's horrible to think about choosing someone for that role, just think if you don't choose, it's so much worse. So hopefully this isn't needed, but if you do have some kind of planning in place, it can give you that peace of mind knowing that you would get to choose in that situation. So kind of the basic things to think about there are who would take care of your child or children, and make sure that they have food and clothing and go to school or daycare, those kind of basic personal needs. The other big piece is the financial piece. If your kids inherit even $1, who would you want to manage that inheritance for them until they're older? And in California, at least, and I think in many states, if a child is under the age of 18 and they inherit assets, then the court is going to appoint someone to manage the assets for them until they're 18. But once they are 18, it's good luck. Here's some money. Hope that you have learned some financial skills a whole lot earlier in life than I did. And that's an important piece of it too. I think both the personal and financial piece. So any thoughts or questions there? I can talk a little bit more about both of those, but what comes to mind for you with those things?
So if I were to choose their grandparents, for instance, would we also have to choose backups, or how would that work?
You don't have to, but I definitely recommend backups if there's anyone that you would choose. You know, if you're like, none of these people in my life are a good choice, I wouldn't just fill them in just to have an extra name on there. But I mean, that it can mean the difference between you getting to choose and a court choosing based on bloodline or some other factor. So I definitely think it's a good idea to choose backups, and just in case, you know, there's any number of reasons why it might not work out that the first person you choose is available.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would also add there, some of my clients come to me and say, like, I would like my parents, my kids' grandparents, to be guardian, but I'm worried about how old they will be or their health by the time my kid graduates high school and is 18. Is that still a good choice? And for me personally, I think yes, if that is who you would choose. There's too many what ifs down the road. We just, it's too hard to see the future. Just like what would work well in the next few years, go ahead and pick that. If you need to update later, that's fine. Choose backups if you can, but if that's who you would choose right now, like absolutely great choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about with regard to businesses? So myself and my husband own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
What type of preparation do we need to do for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different pieces to that as well. I would say in broad strokes, I think probably the most important initial thing is what happens if you don't show up for like a week? What if you're hospitalized? And you know, who would do what in that case? Like, is there an immediate set of, like, someone on your team would need access to certain info, notify clients, hey, she's not going to make it this week, reschedule the appointment, just like the immediate, like, first day to week of you not showing up in an unplanned way. What would need to happen there? And I've kind of lived through, like, not in a complete emergency situation of that, but for me, my dad passed away a few years ago, and even though it was not unexpected, I was not as prepared as I would hope to be now, with just the immediate, like, I can't even deal with calling people to let them know that I'm not going to be in the office tomorrow. So anything you can set up that way for, like, names, phone numbers, directions, like, okay, team member, please call anyone on my calendar. Here's how you get their contact info. You know, what do you do next? And then go from there, like first week, first month, long term. And it can make it easier, not just for your clients, but for you in that situation, because if we do have some kind of emergency, whether it's family, illness, minor, major, those are not the things that we want to be figuring out in that super stressful situation. The other piece I would look at is longer term. Okay, what if I've got this business going and I either become severely incapacitated, permanently incapacitated, or pass away? What happens to the business? And there's two pieces to that as well. Maybe you're so critical to your business that probably the business is going to get wound up in that situation. And someone needs the power to do that. Who's going to sign the documents, close the bank accounts, cancel the business entity, that kind of thing. And then if someone is going to inherit the business, if there's any value to it, whether it's sold off and closed or continued as a business, then who inherits the business? Who's going to run the business? So those are some important pieces to think about. And I think within that, like, the who's going to inherit, who's going to run it long term, can be part of your will or trust. There's business succession planning is an important piece of estate planning, and it spans the whole range. Like, a lot of these things, people say, like, oh, I don't think I'm there, like, my business isn't to that point yet. If I'm not here, my business closes down. All the way up to, like, my business is worth millions, I have a team, it should continue on. Some level of business succession planning is probably going to make sense, and it should meet where you're at now and where you see yourself going in the next few years. So that's kind of a subspecialty within estate planning, depending on what you need. But the first piece I talked about, like who should call who, what's going to happen short term, like that's something that's fairly easy to set up on your own. I think the trickiest part with a lot of these things is like, what do I even need to plan for? I haven't thought through, like, this hasn't happened to me yet, so I don't know what to plan that way. So in that sense, it can be helpful to have like a template or, you know, some place to start with that. If somebody asking like, okay, what happens with these things? So I'm actually preparing something like that to offer to clients, to anyone who wants help with that kind of structure. So that's coming soon. But even just an initial, like, what would need to happen, just thinking it through, writing it down, sharing it with a team member is a really great place to start that can save a lot of headaches.
Okay, awesome. Let me get my laptop charger.
Okay, no worries. What are you doing? Okay. Looks like you're muted. There we go. Right. Can you say hi? Okay. All right. So what else? Anything else coming to mind?
What about the property that I owned before I got married?
Yeah. So that is definitely going to vary by state. Some states.
Yeah.
What's that?
I purchased it in a different state, and we're actually we're in I purchased it in Maryland, and we're in Georgia now.
Okay. Yeah. So definitely worth looking into what the rules are, both where you live and where you bought the property. Short answer is that it may be worthwhile or desirable to kind of keep the bookkeeping separate on that if you choose to. You know, we all hope that things work out. It never matters whether it's separate or community property, but it can be cleanest. And of course, as lawyers, we see everything that goes wrong, and it just is sometimes really nice to just keep things separate. So if you choose to do that, the biggest thing that comes up is bookkeeping and showing like, okay, I bought this property before I got married. That's easy enough. But what about anything that you paid into it after you got married?
Yeah.
Did that come from your salary, from his salary, from, you know, like where did it come from going forward, whether it's paying the mortgage, paying for property taxes, expenses on the home, etc. So those are things to just be aware of, and it never hurts to document things. This is what I bought it at. This is what it was worth when we got married. This is what I paid into it before or after, and where that came from. And it doesn't have to be like a I don't trust you kind of thing. It's just a smart bookkeeping thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with regard to just my bank accounts, 401k, things like that, those are just documents that I can assign a beneficiary to, right?
There's definitely a lot you can do that way, and I think that's a great place to start for anyone. Make sure that your 401k or IRA has beneficiaries, that they're up to date, that, you know, if you've gotten married or had a child since you opened those accounts, take a look back at the beneficiaries, take a look at the alternate or contingent beneficiaries as well. Bank accounts sometimes will let you do the same. It really varies by bank and type of account. Stock accounts, you can generally name a beneficiary as well, and that can be just really great place to start. If if there's nobody named on those accounts, or there was and they died before you or at the same time as you, then it may go back to a situation of like there's nobody living named on these accounts. So alternates come into play there, and then in many states a trust is helpful at that point as well. Some retirement accounts generally wouldn't go into the trust, but some amount of estate planning can be really helpful there to say who's in charge, who's going to inherit those things, whether it's a will or trust, depending on your assets, what state you live in, what makes sense for you. And then the other piece to consider is if you have, whether it's any of those assets, if you name children as beneficiaries for when you pass, if they're under 18, probably a guardian would manage it for them if you pass while they're young. If they're older, if they're 18, 19, 20, or 50, 100, they're going to inherit that asset outright and have full control to do what they like. So I know for me at 18, I maybe had different priorities than I do at 39. So that's something to keep in mind too. Some of the benefits of a will or trust can say not only who will inherit them, but how and when and what should happen. Like with a trust, I can say, I want these assets to go to my kids, but I think 30 might be a better age for them to have full control. And prior to that, I can appoint my brother, my sister, a professional to manage those assets for my kids up until 30 or whatever age I pick. And I can say, education is super important to me, living expenses, healthcare, travel to see their family. Those are how I would want the trustee or the executor to manage the assets for my kids. So those are some of the benefits of setting up a more comprehensive plan. But just naming a beneficiary and making sure it's up to date is a really easy, quick place to start.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Awesome.
Is there anything else you think I should be concerned about?
I think it's just like I think it's an important area to start being aware of, and you know, for a lot of us, it makes sense to kind of ease into learning more about this mystical estate planning field and at what point it might be important for each of us. You know, there's a lot of a sense for a lot of us, I think, that the planning is for someone else, not for us. And I do think that wills, trusts, guardianship is super important for all of us at some level. And yeah, so that's part of my goal here, is to make that a little more approachable and friendly. The other thing I would mention is, I don't know if you have pets, they're close to my heart. If you do, some amount of like, hey, here's what their care looks like. You know, here's their vet. And, you know, maybe appointing someone specifically to inherit them as well, because it's not always the same person that would take care of everything else. So that's what I would add. Really appreciate you taking the time today. Is there anything you want to add about your work and when people should look to hire you, and look at, you know, when is privacy law something that's important for individuals or business owners to be looking at?
Oh, yeah, sure. If you're collecting any type of data, which generally you are, in order to just analyze your business, its growth, competitors, etc. So if you're collecting names, email addresses, any of those data sets, they're called, you know, personal data, personal information, some instances, personal identifiable information, then you should have some type of privacy policy in place on your website, informing your data subjects, what data you're collecting, the purpose, how long you're keeping it, informing them of your security controls in place to protect their data, and also who you're sharing the data with. And that's, I feel, most important, even for small businesses. And then as businesses grow, it's important to make sure they have a data breach response plan. And as employees are hired, it's important to train those employees and create privacy champions out of them by providing them with a minimum annual privacy awareness training, things like that. And then when it comes to your vendors, contractors, third parties, whoever you're sharing data with or working with, it's important that your contracts have data protection clauses in them, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page in the event of a breach, in the event of retention policies, et cetera. You all will remain compliant, reduce the risk of fines, and it also gives your business a competitive edge, because if your business is being bought, if you would like to get into government contracting, things like that, your privacy compliance should be up to par. So yeah, those are just a few reasons why privacy compliance is important for your business. But the main reason is just trust. Trust it's important that our data subjects can trust us with their data and make sure we're doing right by it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's I hadn't thought of that aspect of it, of actually like increasing the value of your business and making it more competitive by having those in place. But it sounds like probably all business owners need some aspect of that. Like, who doesn't have a website these days? That's super critical. How often do we hear about data breaches or employees doing something that results in a lot of expense for the company? Yeah, that's super important to have all that in place. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Well, it's great talking with you today. Let me go ahead and stop